And Shazam, look at that. Just like magic, here's Nick.
It's all nice when the technology works really well.
It really, it really, really is, isn't it? It is. It's so terrific. He's a lighting designer from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He's coordinated systems for major tours, sporting arenas, large venues, permanent installations. He's done the big stuff, and he knows how to really create it and make really amazing experiences. Knows his way around the equipment. And the beautiful thing, Nick, is I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the equipment that's available now, even at the prices that DJs can afford to pick it up at, you can do some pretty spectacular things that you would see at these larger type events just with having a little bit of know-how. Am I speaking the truth?
Absolutely. I mean, when I got started, that's all I was using. As I was using what I thought were the greatest lights I've ever seen. That were got me out of my basement.
Right?
And they really, I took them into a different setting and used them, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But how even the smallest impact of a light used in the right way can be amazing. And then you don't have to spend much. You really don't. And it's all about application and knowing your system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose knowing different applications for different lights, so you could even if you did make a substantial investment, it would give you a lot, like a bigger palette, really, like a bigger artist palette to be able to do more things. So let's go. Let's just kind of start in the land of. I've got a note here that your volume's a little bit low. So if we could boost up your signal a
I
little
can
bit.
definitely turn it up. Is that
There,
better?
that's much better. Yes.
Awesome. I have a really cool little tube amplifier for this mic, so supposedly it makes me sound
I could
better.
tell. It sounds really warm. It sounds really
Yeah.
great. It makes me want to switch out my microphone now. I've got microphone envy. So let's talk about coming out with. So you're for someone who's like starting out. Like I know that there's really cool stuff I could do with lighting. What would be a good place to start to get into the business?
Sure. I mean, the obviously the biggest factor is budget. How much can you spend, and what are you going to actually use that for? So, when I started out, I was using a lot of effect lights, but I would use multiple. So, do you remember the American DJ Tri-Phase?
Hmm.
It was like a kind of an effect light, made a bunch of little square dots all over the place, and I use it a lot at like weddings and concert venues and things like that when I wanted to fill a massive amount of space with a lot of these little dots kind of flying all over the place. It may not have been a massive impact,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to using 6 of them or 8 of them to fill out this entire space, you can really make a very large space get filled up with these little tiny dots. These guys and they're not terribly expensive, but when they have such a wide throw and such a massive spread, and they're also RGB, so you can make them pretty much any color you want. And so starting out as with your first system, you really want to think about where you're going to use these. When I started out, I was using them in a lot of these very low budget electronic music type events that needed
Mm-hmm.
to have a darker experience, but still have a good amount of spread and throw. And I also did a lot of weddings at the same time. So I needed something that was flexible, something that I could use in the wedding as well as in the actual concert venue. And it's actually more,
Sure.
it's more about how you program it as well.
Okay.
And using those specific lights themselves. A lot of people, their first purchase is PARs. They buy PARs so they can light the whole dance floor up. They
Mm-hmm.
can do wall washes. They can do a lot of things. Uplighting is obviously one of the first places that most DJs go because it's an easy upsell
Sure.
for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And it's real
So,
popular and people get it.
right. And, using those uplights can be very beneficial, but sometimes they're a little too bright. You direct them right at the crowd. Sometimes I've seen a couple of DJs doing that, and it's just almost a little too intense.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start out, you want to try to think about where your system is going to be used, where you can actually make money off of it. And for me, it was those little bit brighter effect lights, something I could use in both sorts of venues.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I kind of developed and got a little bit more into it, I realized I did need the PARs. I did need the strip lights, or I needed moving heads, or me personally, I'm actually more of a scanner guy. I don't
Okay.
like moving heads.
Oh, really?
I've never, I don't know. I've never really liked moving heads because to me, they always have some of them are 720, some of them are 540 that they can
Mm-hmm.
rotate around. To me, that's just too many times rotating around. I don't need all of that. I like having the very clear, square that the scanner can put out, and not to mention they're really fast. So
Okay.
you can make them move a lot quicker
Sure,
than
quicker than the physical. It's moving a mirror a lot faster than it is to
exactly.
move a
It's also less
whole
moving
object.
parts for it to break.
Mm-hmm.
Inside the moving head, I don't know if you've ever opened those up, but there's wires that run on the insides of it right through the little arms. And, the most good manufacturers have great builds in there so that you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to worry about that being a problem. But it's still a point of failure. It's something
Mm-hmm.
that could, the motor's a moving part. It's going to fail eventually.
Sure.
Whereas with the scanner, if it fails, it's a, pop, done.
Yeah,
And
right.
it just changes it out really quick. Whereas if it's a moving head, it's a pretty big job. But anyway, so I started out with a couple of scanners, and I started adding that into my light system. Now, the big thing that people get really intimidated with when they first look at lighting is they think, oh, well, how am I going to control this?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do with it? A really popular thing to do right now is just to do an IR remote, control the uplights or even some of the effect lights with an IR remote.
What's IR stand for?
IR stands for infrared, so it uses like a little strobe light on the front of the remote
So you
that
actually have to point it
flashes.
at it like the.
Yeah. It's very line of sight. There has to be a receiver and a transmitter, and the transmitter acts like a little infrared, and
Mm-hmm.
infrared light is beyond our field of sight. That little blink, whenever it sends the signal, just like your TV remote,
Mm-hmm.
will communicate a control signal to that light itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's really cool is you can even control effect lights. You can control moving heads nowadays with those. Back
Wow.
when I started, you couldn't do all that. So I relied heavily on a good master slave and sound mode setups, because sometimes I couldn't be at the venue the whole time. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a couple of wedding venues where I would just rent lights to the DJ, and he or she wouldn't own any of the stuff. So I would
Sure.
just bring it in, and they would bring in an extra thing because the bride and groom wanted it. And so, but I would have to set it up to the point where I couldn't sit there all night and play with it. I had to go do something else or another show or whatever. So I found that, this is something that not a lot of manufacturers do, but it's really cool to see a good auto program or like a good sound mode in a
Mm-hmm.
light that connects to another light and does a coordinated show. Like, to me, that's like one of the biggest things that you want to look for in your first system, is something that will do a coordinated show with two lights where you don't have to sit there and control it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really beneficial thing, and that's where I kind of got started with stuff, because I was able to put in these systems and then walk away and go do another show, and that I needed to control.
Yeah, for years I
So,
ran 4 microscans, all slaved, and it was just like
mhm,
on off. And when they were on, they were in sound mode, audio mode,
mhm.
and because there was an audio input, and then there was the on off, and they were great. They were really dynamic all together, and they'd alternate. I mean, they weren't all just like doing exactly the same thing. They had great sequences.
It made you look really good.
Yeah, right. It's
It
like,
made you look
okay,
like you got an
dancing, and
awesome
then like
system.
mirror ball button and dancing button, and that's it. When you're trying to focus on music and you're not necessarily trying to like do the light show and then go back to the music and do the light show. It's kind of nice to have some good dynamics going on.
Yeah, and you're able to provide a better experience. And it's so easy to do that. And there's a lot of lights out there that do that. So look for that when you're looking for a new system, and you're looking just for stuff to buy, especially from an entry level. And then that's when I got in. I was like, I really kind of want this to do red and blue chase, or I really want this. And I started to get more picky about what I wanted.
Okay, sure. More specific. Wanted more
Yep, and
control.
then exactly, I wanted more control.
This is how relationships
My
always go.
my first controller was actually a light switch board that I made. It was 4 outlets with switches, and I would sit there and turn lights on and off as the night would go along. It
Mm-hmm.
was it was really, I had a whole bunch of these only sound mode lights, and yeah. Did I lose you? Are you still there? Okay, good.
No, it was a little bit
Um,
of buffering.
I had,
No.
I had one of those frozen moments where it's like, but anyway, so those were really cool. And having a little switchboard that you could turn things on and off. In fact, I even made a little like YouTube video or whatever that was just literally just me sitting there going click, 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 and
Nice.
I sold that system like several times just because it looked like it was turning on to the music,
Oh, awesome. But it was actually,
and
you were like back there, like, doing a manual sync.
Yes, yeah, and I actually got it to the point where I timed how long it took for the light to boot up with the lamp to warm up and start outputting. So I'd
Wow.
be like, okay, there's a part coming up, and then wait a few and hit it, and then like 5 seconds later, it would kick right on the right time. It was I had way too much time, but the my hands, but and then so you eventually want to go to more control and more things that you can do with it, and this is where you get into DMX and controlling lights specifically the way you want. And this is also the hardest part to get people past, actually, because you have to figure out what type of control system you want and what type of interaction you want with the light system at the events you're at. Because
Mm-hmm.
a guy that does larger events, and a lot of the stuff that I kind of got pulled into was, I mean, I needed some type of control system. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have just
It wasn't just
any.
on off and run to the music.
Right, exactly, yeah. And so a lot of my first initial softwares were very basic. I had to go through a couple different softwares to figure out kind of the one that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But most softwares that are out there nowadays allow you to download a preview of it, and you can try it out and see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a really hard thing. I don't know, Jason, how many lighting softwares you know, or if any.
I only know
The
what is it? I want to say, no, it's not Jukebox Express. It's I said it earlier. If we could rewind this program, um, what what was it? I went to a lighting symposium, and that's when I was like really impressed. That's when I got the idea, like, oh my gosh, with this program, maybe somebody in the chat room will say what it is, but in this
Mhm.
with this program and moving heads, I could actually like track like a grand entrance, and I could spotlight
Mhm.
the speeches, and I could and actually pre-program the sequences because they're going to start here and they're going to end there, so you could just
Yeah.
kind of do a joystick thing and have it run across.
Yeah, and I mean, Matt, how hard was it to pick that all up? Was it
Really
pretty
hard.
self-explanatory? It was
I
really
was
hard.
like, wow, I could do all this if only I
Just
learned it. And it would, to me, it
just
was
beating your head against a wall.
if I knew binary code, I would like on,
Yeah,
off, on.
yeah, and I mean, it gets really, and the farther you go, and the
Show
more advanced
Express.
you get.
That's what I'm trying to
Okay,
say.
oh, right on. Okay, and that's a great one. It really is. They have. I mean, and this is the thing with software is once you learn one, it's really hard to change to another unless it's like similar.
Like
A
cell
lot of
phones.
people. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, going from a Mac to an iPhone to what's it called, to an Android is a
Mm-hmm.
real change. I mean, I'm actually I'm going to say this. I'm thinking about getting the BlackBerry Priv.
What?
Yeah,
A
yeah.
BlackBerry? I thought they
I
went out of
know.
business.
And no, they're still in business. They just came out with their first smart, like touch phone, like touch
Oh,
screen with.
wow.
No, I shouldn't say their first because their first like touch screen phone thing was like that was a long time ago. But they,
Why? I mean, this is off topic, but like,
I know. I'm
why? I
sorry,
mean,
but
it's like the most. I mean, it's like you and 10 other customers are like BlackBerry. What's that
BlackBerry.
all about?
No, it was
Control?
cool because it actually has a little keyboard that pops at the bottom and everything.
Oh, that's what you want. Is you want the click, 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 click.
Yep.
Is that
And
what
then
you
it's like
miss?
it's also got a little time machine, so it'll take you right back to the early 2000s.
To the glory days. It's like it's my time machine cell phone. That's too priceless. Okay, so
It's fine. Anyway, sorry. Back to
back
lighting.
to
Back to
lighting.
lighting.
That's so funny. It says so much about you, Nick.
But so there's so many different ways to go with control. It just really depends on what you're going to do with it. There's a lot of really easy systems out there. There's a lot of really easy ones to pick up and learn. There's some really complicated ones, and they can definitely do some very they can simplify things, and the more advanced you get in the different softwares,
Mm-hmm.
the more kind of crazy things you can do quicker. So if you see a lot of these big concert setups and they have these massive chases running in all different directions and all the moving heads are doing a opposite rotation and they're fanning in and out and all that stuff. This
Mm-hmm.
is all stuff that larger software does fairly quickly because it's designed to do it
Sure.
like on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really paying for that, but you're also paying for having the ability to really do a lot of crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The boards are very expensive though when you get into that top end stuff, but for starters, there's nothing wrong with getting a 40 channel board or there's a bunch of them out there. I think mine, when I started out, I was using a DMX operator,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean, I've had that thing for man, I don't even know how many years, many years, but and that's even a little advanced sometimes too for some people. And you can do even simpler stuff than that. There are smaller, only 3-channel or 6-channel boards that you can hook up through
So
DMX.
where's a place to start? Like to start that you can build on. Like we were just talking about, we were kind of joking about cell phones and how it's like, oh man, if I have to figure this whole phone out if I switch over, right? Even when I used to when I switched 3 times, I switched DJ software for the music. And every time was like, oh man, it was like, okay, now I got to learn this one and
It's a huge learning curve.
how
Yeah.
the and go through the learning curve and get comfortable and confident before I actually took it at an event. So is there anything that you could recommend that that you could start with and grow with?
hmm Absolutely. It really, and again, it depends on how you use your lights. There's a lot of different places out there to go that you can ask questions about how you use your system and how you like it. Like for example, if you're going to use a lot of uplighting and you're going to have not a lot of moving headlights, but you're going to start out with the uplighting, you're going to invest in uplighting first,
Mm-hmm.
then you're really kind of best off going with basic color control, because some of the basic color control boards and the basic color control software can do a lot of really fun stuff with those pars and make the chase programs into that. And they can do some really cool stuff. Don't get me wrong, the bigger software, you can grow with that and really do some crazy stuff with it. But
Mm-hmm.
if you want to start out, sometimes it's better to just go with a very basic board, something that's simple, something that you can do on the fly and not necessarily be tied down to something specific. Like I saw the other day, a DJ company just bought a massive like console. It was like 12 grand. And they did it because they
Wow.
want to look like they're worth the money they're charging, which is totally legit. I get that. But when I see what they're doing with it, they're controlling 2 moving heads and 20 pars.
Wow. That's a
It's
big
just,
investment for a piece of gear to just control that.
the gear is not worth as much as the board itself. That's
So
the crazy thing about it. Now,
yeah, is
granted, they're
that
probably
hard?
going
So
to.
that board, that's like a big piece of hardware though,
Oh,
right?
it's massive. Yeah, it's like a big DJ console, but it's
Sure.
a lot more money.
Are there a lot of software options
Sure.
where you can just where you can kind of grow in the software arena, or I suppose, or does that kind of coincide with the hardware, the hardware consoles? Like you have to kind of how do you balance both of those? Can you run just off software and kind of do it
Yeah.
off mousing and all that kind of stuff, or
Absolutely.
is it a
There's a couple of softwares out there, including the one that you mentioned before. They have like an add-in that you can connect a MIDI controller to.
mm-hmm.
So once you learn it kind of on the computer itself, you can connect a MIDI controller, an outside controller, and actually do even more with it. So as you kind of get more comfortable with the system and get it the way you want it, you can set it up. And what I do, I have a Ableton APC4, an Akai APC40. And that has red, green, blue buttons in it. And what I do is, if I know, I've got all my pars along the top row of the little board,
Mm-hmm.
I can actually change the colors of each button, so I know what color it is. So I don't even have to look at the screen to know what's going on. So if you don't want to have your screen taken up by the lighting software, you can set these boards up and have them on the aside, so that you don't have to worry about actually taking up extra screen.
Right.
And that's really easy to do. For like about $500, somewhere around there, you can get a pretty decent software from most companies that will get you it'll get you to be good enough that you can do some pretty fun stuff. There's a lot of softwares that you can definitely grow with and could do a lot more, but a lot of the ones that will take you to the pro arena are really very different. They're based on an older form of lighting. They're more like cue based. They're more like you have to set up cues and stack them, and then there's a lot more stuff associated with that. Whereas with a lot of the more computer based softwares that were designed to be run on a computer and only computer,
Mm-hmm.
Blizzard's Eclipse software is a good example of that. It's like a touchscreen type software that's specifically designed for touchscreens.
Sure.
So there's a lot of different directions you can go with this based on how you want to use your system. And this is the point where you have to kind of think about where you want to go with the system, where your business could grow. And yeah, it's a big decision, but it's a great investment because you're gonna have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. So, what are some things that you've done that are that would be like saleable? You know how we talked about like, well, uplighting is easy because clients get it and things like that. What are some things that would be worth to put some time and effort into that really create a wow that can that can stand on its own
Sure.
in
I
terms
mean,
of
one of
a
my
single
my
head
big
on
things
the
is I like
monograms?
to I like to make sure that the my like auto programs and stuff that I design and control in my software are all like a specific, like I have a couple of waves that I like to use. There's a couple
Mm-hmm.
cans, things like that I like to make with my moving heads. But one of the things you kind of can step back a little bit and do for your system that can be really affordable but still a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of these effect light fixtures that are out there. This can be like a derby of some kind, or any kind of an effect fixture, even a panel fixture, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the Pixelicious or whatever, that has kind of a big LED panel with some SMD LEDs on it. A lot of those fixtures have built-in auto programs, and then they'll actually have a speed control that you can adjust to go faster or slower.
Mm.
Just having that speed control on a little dial is really nice,
Yeah.
because you can set it up on there and just sit there, and while you're looking at something else, you can adjust the speed to the time of the music, and it can make the system look a lot more effective while still not actually adding all that much programming to it.
Mm-hmm.
You basically just have 6 buttons that will say program 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you just have a little dial in there you can adjust to actually speed the program up or not. It's really easy to do and add in. You really don't have to do much for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, when it comes to moving heads though, there's a lot that you can do with them, and they really, that adds in that, software can really add another level to that, because you don't have to physically sit there and program each position. Like with my original system, when I first programmed it with my board, my actual like physical board, every time I wanted to have the moving heads the scanners do a sweep, like a
Mm-hmm.
circle, I'd have to program spot 1, then I'd program spot 2, and program spot 3,
Wow.
spot 4, and then you'd have to then you'd figure out how long you wanted that to go, and you can adjust that
You
and
mean
play it.
during dance music, like you'd have to you'd have to program in your sweeps for just like autoplay?
Yep, I would do
Wow.
that, and that with a software you can do that in minutes, but with a board or something that's a little more physical, it takes a little
Sure,
bit
you're like
longer to
punching it
do.
all in.
Yep. Whereas a lot of softwares will have that all pre-generated.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a couple that even have little pictures of what the shape itself is going to end up making, and you can preload some really fun curves in there, so it'll do dancing and chasing and all that
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff.
The one thing about and the other thing about like the moving heads that I've observed is it can do there's so many things ambient things that it can do. You can put a kind of an aurora borealis kind of wash on the ceiling, and it can do like some really kind of some really layered things because of its intensity and
Mhm.
and it's nature that I think like created effects more than just the flashing. I mean, disco dance lighting, flashing on and off. That's cool. That's fine. But then to do something that is I mean, to really work on like what can I do that's different, that creates a different experience, is always the question I would always ask of everything that I'd be working with.
Sure. And I mean, you can do that a lot with, especially that is one of the big benefits of moving heads, is when you put them out kind of a little bit off a wall or something, you can
Mm-hmm.
turn them around and point them right behind you and have a really cool like pattern going on behind you.
Mm-hmm.
You can have, several patterns scattered around the room, and that's the flexibility of moving heads. You can really, put them wherever you want to put them. But yeah, and a lot of the software program will allow you to recall all that stuff very quickly, and you can do that with boards too, but it just takes a lot more time to set up and do.
Mm-hmm.
If you have multiple computers, or you're gonna eventually, if you're doing well at DJing, you're gonna have more than one computer you're using over time.
Yeah.
um
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
everybody.
Who doesn't
Yeah,
have more than
and
one computer? I mean, really. This is
well,
the
right.
2016s, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have one sitting around, like, there's guarantee you there's one in your closet.
Exactly, right. And
Yep.
it actually works. Unlike
Yep.
10 years
Indeed.
ago, that was like the one that broke down. What's a system that would be something like so? I mean, this is all cool and fun, and especially for somebody who's like really into lighting. Let's say you want some cool lighting effects, and you want it to look cool, and you want to be relevant, But you're not really into lighting, so you want something that's pretty easy, plug and play kind of thing. What would be a good basic setup? I think this was asked in the chat room a little while too. Like, what would be a good basic setup that you would recommend as far as pieces and parts that would kind of cover the bases of most of your needs for a typical wedding? That would just be like, okay, I've got a good basic solid, you know, essentials.
Sure. It just depends on the type of wedding, obviously. Some weddings you really have to use a moving head for. You know what I mean? Just because it raises kind of the level, a little bit more elegant, things like that. But my one rule that I always remember when it comes to buying lighting is you always want to buy in pairs. I never buy one or three or whatever. I always, if I buy three, I always have kind of that extra one. I know what to do with it. And I can never get, I'm also a huge, I love symmetry, so that's probably part of the reason. But you have to buy two of something. One of the things that I've always told people when it comes to like buying your lighting system for, especially as a new DJ, you want to buy stuff that you can definitely use in multiple situations. So like 2 effect lights, it's a great place to start. 4 pars. That's not a huge system, but you can do a lot with just 2 effect lights and 4 pars. You really can. The other thing that are really nice are a lot of the all-in-one systems that are out there. There's quite a few of them from a lot of different companies that have, 8 heads of pars. They have a whole bunch of different accessories. There's a bunch. Those are nice because they're kind of an all-in-one, and they kind of have that, a lot of those built-in programs already figured out. Like you don't have to have software necessarily to control it.
Yeah, somebody in the chat room mentioned the Gig Bar IRC.
That's a great example.
They thought was good for beginners and for a basic small wedding setup.
And that's that multi head system that I'm talking about. There's a couple other ones out there, and they're all very powerful, and they have a lot of, you're going to have your initial investments a little bit higher. You're going to have to buy and spend the money on the bar itself. And I'm not saying it is or isn't too expensive, because those are, I guarantee you there's a lot of people out there that have them, and they are definitely very effective when they're out there, just like a lot of the other bar systems. So you really, but again, it depends on what you want to do with it. With me, when I made my system, I had to have it that like the ability to go from a small venue into the big venue,
right?
Depending on where I was, and so that's why I invested heavily in those type of effect lights, because I knew that I could use that in a bigger space and make the bigger space feel, really big. So, and I mean, when I finally did go and get moving heads, I did get scanners, which as I said before, but to me, scanners were just a better investment because I could buy them, a lot more of them, at a lot cheaper price.
Okay.
And it, nowadays it's really, people like moving heads more because you can put them on top of a totem, or you can hang them next to your DJ system or whatever. And they do look like you're really bringing in more of a system than just, a couple of chintzy effect lights, which is not really it stinks to think about that way.
Is that the downside to scanners? They look chintzy.
A lot of people think they look silly and they look cheap.
Really?
Yeah, it really stinks, because some of them aren't. Some of them are really expensive.
But I mean, with the lights off,
yeah,
right? Like, who really knows with the lights off? Like,
I know.
Back.
I've never once had a bride or groom or a customer come to me and say, "Those lights look really cheap."
Yeah, right.
I've never had anybody say that to me, except for, well, actually that's not true. I was at a wedding, but I wasn't DJing. I was at the wedding, and they had some very small little like bank style lights there that I heard a lady go up and talk to the guy like, "Is this all you brought? Do you have any more in the
Like, what do you mean?"
Yeah, and I had a little chuckle at it, but I try not to get involved.
Right? Yeah. Oh, right. Exactly. Well, but I'm the guy that, like, way back in the 90s, like, my dad, I had 2 really great dimmer packs that actually had the 4 channels light organ style, right? So it's like your bass was started on channel 1 and then went all the way to the high end of frequencies. So they had this. So basically, together with my dad, we built a 6. How many were there? There was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 banks of 4 lights. All
Nice.
coffee cans, all put together in a
Coffee
truss.
cans?
And in the coffee cans, and I painted them black. You know what I mean? So I wasn't like advertising for Folgers, the Folgers light show, right? But in the dark, nobody knew, right? In the dark, it was
Right,
like
right.
it was around the whole DJ. I DJ'd in the middle, and it went around me, and they were like going with the music and everything. It looked really cool, right? And then when I go to tear down, they'd be like, "Are those coffee cans?" Like, of course not. I wouldn't buy. I wouldn't have
No.
coffee cans. Get out of here! Don't look
That's
so closely at those. Shouldn't you be going off with some girl right about now?
Well, and you know that's true in it is a little bit true in the production world too. They really you really kind of make do with what you got, and a lot of the times they have really nice high end lights and those things. That's a different statement. But I was when I was on the road a long time ago. I got stuck in a venue that was, I mean, it was basically a basement. It was a very small place. I sent our rider ahead to say, hey, I need this much power, I need all this other stuff, but I didn't have I didn't have enough pars for what I thought I would need. So I was like, hey, do you have any house like lights and he's like, oh yeah, we got 16 pars up in the ceiling, well, you'll be good. I'm like, okay, cool, great. I get there, yeah, it's track lighting. So it's literally just track lighting run all the way across the stage, and I mean, it worked. You know, it worked.
Yeah.
I couldn't dim it. It was just on all the time. So, you know, that's fine.
Right.
But so, you know, you make do with what you can. And when you get into venues like that, it's just really important to, you know, just make it look good. Do what you can. You know how that goes. I mean,
Right.
That's just the way it is. But you know, back to our original talking about what to buy and when to, you know, like what to invest in as a DJ or whatever.
Okay, let's. I'm going to pause you right there. There's a great place to take a break. We want to hear from our sponsors right now, DJ Event Planner and Electro Voice, and we're talking to Nick Airriess about music. We're talking about lighting is what we're talking about, and we'll be back in just a moment.
DJ Event Planner will change the way you manage and run your business. Streamline all of your procedures and software into one easy-to-manage system. DJ Event Planner, the ultimate online planning tool.
And we're back, and I'm talking to Nick, and we're talking about lighting, and I'm dying to share this story. This is one of my favorite stories about like you were talking about earlier about homemade DJ setups and your homemade switches.
Sure.
And my uncle was an electrician, and so I had his great equipment tools to draw from. And do you remember those old light organ effects that you could hang on the wall? And it was like in a wood case, and it had like kind of a screen, and there'd be like a red and a green light, and then you turn it on, and it would like flash to the music. It'd be for home use, right? It'd be for your home. Do you remember that at all?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, anyway, they were really cool. Okay. And so I thought, I got this idea. I'm like, since that light bulb in there is going on and off, if I could have that affect a sensor, I could then translate that to a sensor that I could take it to a bigger light system. So I got this. I talked to my uncle. I said, what do you think? He goes, well, the sensors that are on top of light poles, we could use one of those. And we'll just, I'm like, sure, okay. He said, well, we'll put a little screen on it, and these are like it's morning, and then the light shuts off kind of switches,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
That's not real sensitive. And so, but we kind of, he built a little capsule for it, so it would there was a doorway, so I could set the sensitivity on it, and so I thought it would be really cool to have this effect to where it would when it would blast with the sound, that I would just use like kind of white lights. You know how like in a concert they'd like blast the audience with white lights.
Sure. Yeah,
So I filled 3 boards with 4 each of 320 watt light bulbs. That were floods, and I put them all across the stage, and I turned this puppy on, but then I realized it's not very sensitive. So they would go and they would stay on. And
because the light would turn off.
the light would blink, it would activate it, turn it on, but it wouldn't turn it off. It wasn't sensitive enough to actually blink on and off to the music. So it would just go bam. And it would literally
constant audience blinder.
It would like push the audience across the gymnasium as they're like, turn it off, turn it off. I'm like, oh, I'm getting it right. So the first half of the night, I tried to get it set right, so it's not like pushing them away. And I finally gave up. It was that or be lynched. And they weren't digging my lighting effects as much as I was in my little homemade setup. So how to repel an audience. I could write a book about it.
There you go. It's all right. I've seen lighting designers at actual concerts do worse. There was one that I was at that actually got I think it was one of the dimmer packs got stuck on for some of the halogen crowd blinders, and it was similar effect actually.
Oh no!
Well, everyone just cheered. Like it was, they didn't care.
Right,
like,
and if the concert's good enough, there's like, yeah, it's us.
It was amazing how many phones came up actually.
Yeah.
They're like, you can see me now.
That's the upside. I didn't get that experience. Like, you on the stage, turn it off. Just turn it off. So very fun. So anyway, thanks for indulging me that story. And we're talking about like modern stuff that like really works and looks really great, and getting that that DJ setup going before the break.
Yep, indeed. And I mean, we were talking originally about like where to kind of start, and I think one of the things that you got to think about when you're looking at your first kind of system, your first indulgence into lighting, which I like to call it that because it is a lot of fun. And once you kind of get into it, it's a bug, and you kind of get, really connected to it. A lot of the times it's good to go and actually play around with the lights first. Go to your local dealers, check them out, see what they look like, see how they feel. I've had a lot of instances where I've bought like a cheap plastic light and it's not really lasted me all that long. I used to use crates, these, those ones you'd see at Home Depot or wherever.
Sure.
The yellow top ones, use those kind of crates like crazy. And I know a lot of DJs do as well. But in there's still the potential that damage can happen, even if you do a really good job of packing. Sometimes you hit a bad bump. It happens. But me personally, I like to stick to a lot of metal housings. There are a lot of plastic ones that are out there that are pretty solid. I'm just more of a metal housing person. I like to have something that I can, if I dent it, not a big deal. But yeah, that's one thing you got to think about. But I mean, you also want to think about how flexible your system's going to be. And this is kind of one of the other things I wanted to make sure to bring up tonight, was that you have to kind of think about what you're going to do with it in a year, in 2 years. For me, I really like to, recently, I guess, I've been investing in a lot of projectors because I know that I can use those for a lot of different types of situations. Last week, we had an event that I got to help out with, which is an outdoor lighting kind of event, where we used a projector to actually project onto vines different patterns. And like we had a little frog that was like moving along or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And we had like some like plasma effects and whatever. And it was really really cool.
On
and
vines,
so
like grapevines.
Yeah, like grapevines on a wall. It's
Wow.
really really cool. Yeah, and I mean one of the things you have to look for in that is just high contrast. So you've got the darkness, and then the light comes kind of out of nowhere. But I mean, I'm waiting to see the guy or the girl that has a projector as an uplight. And that sounds kind of goofy, but it's if you think about it, you can do a lot of really cool things with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're cheap enough now that you can probably find them. You just have to make a nice little stand for it. But if you use a projector as an uplight, you could do, pretty much any color you want. You can do a lot of different effects and everything. There's not really a lot of software out there that controls it. There's a couple, but that to me is where I think a lot of this is going. But that aside,
is that like the going down the video mapping type route with
video mapping is
not just going with patterns and washes, but actually getting into kind of more imagery.
You could, yeah, you absolutely could. I've seen some people do like water effects on a wall. I've seen people do just flowers. It's not really all that fancy, but they just duplicate a bunch of flowers all over the screen and then project it onto a couple of different walls. But it can even be as simple as just having the projector output green, or blue or purple. You don't have to use it as a video source. You can use it as as something that can draw a little red square
Mm-hmm.
and have that come up on the light on the wall and look like this. And then in the video, even though the projector is not moving, the video can do this. And all of a sudden you have an active effect light, something that can actually, work.
Yeah.
But my point with all that was more is just so that you think about where you could go and what you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And projectors are a great thing because they're very flexible, but they're also very sensitive. They're lamps, so you got to worry about moving around and breaking them, and they've got lenses in them that can get damaged.
How many lumens do you have to really, because I mean there's a whole range of lumens, and lumens is like how much the light output that they put out. Do you want to be careful not to be buying too low?
Absolutely. It depends on your system. If you've got, I like to think that if you've got lights that are about 100 watts or 100 watt LEDs and under, you can basically make do with about 3,500 lumens. Now, granted, that depends if it's a short throw. That's not the case. Your 3,500 lumens in a short throw is not really quite good enough. You're going to need something a little bit brighter. Excuse me. But when it comes to anything above 100 watts, you really want to be in the 5,000 to and up range. I've seen some 240 watt LEDs out there, some 200 watt LEDs that are out there that will easily overdo a 5,000 lumen projector. They are really bright. Excuse me. But so you want to kind of look at that. One of the things that I always look for when it comes to projectors is their contrast ratio, because to me, I need that darkness, because I also use my projectors as effect lights. I use a software called Penguin that actually makes my projectors act as if they were lasers.
Oh, wow.
So I don't have to have any variances. I don't have to have any of that stuff.
That's cool.
And it's really nice. And I actually did a demo on it a few weeks ago for a couple of guys out in Madison here. It was a lot of fun. We had a couple of guys show up that came and spun, and it was really, really good little event. And I was trying to show them that you can have the projectors up on stands, spin them, and have them be your GoPro projectors. And then once you're done with the GoPro projection, you can actually turn them back towards the audience and have them be an effect light, or a laser simulator, as they call it. So it just, again, that talking more about the flexibility of your system.
Yeah. What software is that again? Penguin?
It's called Penguin. Yep. It's called Penguin Beyond. They have a laser emulator built into it, which is pretty cool.
Penguin, like the bird, Penguin Beyond?
No.
I'm not hearing you right.
Yeah, it's like pangolin. So
Pangolin.
it's like, yep.
Pangolin.
Pang.
That's cool.
And
then you bring up monogramming, like doing monograms now are like, or even on walls and different places, like gotten a lot easier with projectors.
Well, and it's even like the easiness of it is awesome, because you just dump any image in,
right?
But that's where that contrast ratio comes in though too, because you don't want to have this like lit square showing up on the wall, Mm-hmm. And so with a good contrast ratio, it gives you those better darks, like those much darker darks.
So what is a good contrast ratio?
So, I mean, I generally stay about 10,000 and up. I don't 10,000 to 1 and up. Mm-hmm. I found that there's a couple out there. I think there's an InFocus out there that's like a 25,000 to 1. There's an Epson out there that's a 20,000 to 1. They're really, really nice and they look great, but they're you really got to watch what your surface is you're projecting on, because if you only have like 3,500 lumens,
that's not much.
It's not
that's
much.
Pretty thin.
And if you're projecting onto a darker surface, it's going to be really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that you can do now then with that is you can take your monograms and you can size them to specific points on the wall. You don't have to necessarily keep it centered in that actual image. It's certainly easier, but you can now take software and move the monograms to the exact spot that you want with that and turn it and manipulate it so it's shaped to the wall. It's really, really easy. And I mean, the other thing, it's video. So you can make moving monograms, things that, birds fly in and assemble into the actual monogram. Like it's so cool what you can do nowadays with that.
Yeah. It's, I think, it's video in projecting like this is the future, or is the now, in terms of all kinds of thinking about like the Olympics, right? Like that was the opening of the Olympics this year was dazzling. And they were like, this is low budget. It was video mapped almost the whole thing, right? And it was actually mind blowing. I mean, But I think I was messaging Jeremy Breck. I'm like, how many lumens is that? I'm like, oh my gosh, it was like so bright.
I think those were actually 40Ks.
Really, 40Ks? Because I guess that would make sense. A friend of mine does like really high tech video mapping, graphic projection, all that kind of stuff, and he helped out with the Hunger Games, one of their events for the big opening, and they projected 50,000 lumens, or it might have been 100,000 lumens, like projected together. They had two projectors
two projectors
overlaid
stacked.
because they projected on a black wall. And and ergo 100,000 lumens, and and they had the actual Mockingjay, the flaming out Mockingjay that would come out of this wall, like
awesome.
They would fire up, and invariably people would be like, "Whoa, what's that?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?" Right? Because it would just come out on a black wall, which is like really crazy, like not even a reflective surface. That's a lot of light.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of pictures of the actual projectors that were used at the Olympics, and you're talking about these things that are probably $100,000, $200,000.
Oh yeah.
There's like 16 of them all stacked in like this big row, and it's because a lot of them are overlaid, but some of them are just covering different areas.
Sure.
It's just so cool what you can do with some of that stuff these days. You've seen a lot of the cake wedding cake video mapping stuff. I actually got a chance to do some outdoor video mapping for like on glass. To show some like advertisements and whatever. It was really basic, but it was like a permanent install for like 3 weeks. It was really, really cool. There's so many things you can do with those now, especially because a lot of the software that's out there right now, you can do so much with them, but it just means you have to learn a lot more about it before you get into it.
Right? But it's definitely,
there's good.
I like the way you think in terms of like, what am I going to be doing? Where am I going 2 years from now in your investments? So it's not always like, oh, well, you're not constantly like, oh, if I just buy this, you're not just kind of like always stacking up like new lighting gear for every idea that you get, trying to think out ahead a little bit. I think is really, really brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, you want to do the things that are going to make you money. Obviously, you want to have some up lights, you want to have some effect lights. I wouldn't go too crazy on them though, because you can really do a lot with even a basic projector. And I mean, even a 3,500 lumen projector is like maybe $400 at the most right now.
Yeah.
So you're talking about not really having to spend a whole lot of money to do this, and it just can make your system look so cool. And when the bride and groom see that like spinning monogram being created, it's just. I seriously have not. I've not seen a bride and groom cry in a long time. Like when they saw the first like renderings of it, but I saw buddies. I was actually with a friend of mine when he was booking out a wedding, and he was showing the bride and groom this first like rendering of it, and she like just started bawling, crying.
Yeah, it's amazing. The wow factor is there. I mean, we take it for granted often, like, oh, that's just a that, but they don't know it's still gee whiz Walt Disney for them. It really is. Right. Nick, this hour has flown by. This has been so interesting and so fun.
It's already been an hour.
It's already been an hour. Yeah, you're just like this wealth of. You're a bloomin' onion of knowledge. I mean, that's a lot in my world. So that's just fantastic. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. And people can follow you on, they can friend you on Facebook, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, of course. And actually, the best place to follow me is on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's, I don't know how many people still use Twitter, if it's a thing. I don't know, but I'm just kidding.
Everybody does.
Everybody's at least. But I have a lot of, actually, I do a music blog as well.
Cool.
And we do it bi-weekly. So a lot of the music is shared on there, and it's all stuff to look up and that you can get, licensed ready and everything. You can search it on your Promolines and stuff like that. Most of the mixes are ready for that. So if you guys want to listen to some new music or a little more cutting edge EDM, I'm also a place for that.
Awesome. Nick, thank you so much. This has been a real blast. And I no doubt John will have you on the show again because you've got so much great stuff to share. Thanks so much. It's been a great time.
Awesome talking to you, Jason.
All right. Have a great night.
All right, see you, bud.
Bye-bye. Coming up next, we are going to have the DJN-TV staff. The team is coming in, MJ, Dan, the works. We're going to be talking about Craigslist DJ ads. This is going to be a real fun and funny night. It's going to be coming up in just a few right here on DJN-TV Live Monday Night Chat.